Hey Trish,
Hey Sitesh, nice to see you.
nice to see you too. How are you doing?
Good, good. So you're in your place isn't new anymore. You've been there over a year.
Yeah, this is a different place now. So I moved here like almost 1.5 years back. So now it feels like a home, I guess.
Yeah, I bet. Nice.
How are you? Oh, are you in Mexico?
I'm in Mexico City, yeah.
All right. How long have you been
Because
here?
just about 3 months. And my plan was to pet sit everywhere for
Right.
accommodations, and then when the pandemic hit, there wasn't any pet sitting jobs. So
That's well, everyone's pet sitting, I guess. So they don't need like probably other people at that point also.
exactly, yeah, no one was traveling. So I went to the States for a little bit, but I was like, I just don't want to be here. And there weren't any other countries that really were accepting Americans and were affordable and were close. And I just thought Mexico's on my list, so I might as well check it out.
Fair enough. Have you been moving
Yeah.
around in like
No, no, no. No, I came here mid-October and I just found this apartment and signed a lease. And yeah, I go out. I'm working with the dog shelter. So I
all
go out
right.
and walk dogs every day.
That's super fun. Like, but
Yeah.
how come? How long are you planning to be there?
Indefinitely. I'd like to learn Spanish, and I don't have any plans to go anywhere else. So I'm just kind of letting it all unfold. There's no
Yeah.
plan.
All right. Like, yeah. So I was just thinking, like, so I'm also trying this one, right? So it's just like I was thinking, sitting around and like see what can be done. So I'm like, well, there's so many interesting people around, and what like key idea was thinking like, well, there's a lot of things, like US also. Let's say, we read about news and all the things it's just going on all the time, but like, how can you really like as a general, it kind of like seems clear, but as an individual, like let's look through like a person's eye basically and see like what it actually entails. So I was like, well, let's try experiment and let's see how it comes out. And super thanks for reaching out, and that's nice to start with.
Yeah, it's exciting. So you already done one episode, or where are you with the process?
You're the number one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So cool.
Yeah. So I was like, well, let's see how it works. So I'll just like how should so if I remember correctly, we met like in 2018, like you were in the
19.
19, right? So in summer
Yeah,
in Amsterdam, you're like dog sitting for a while. That's where I first time met you,
that's right.
uh, and then well, so why don't we start with like just like a quick journey of your like where you're originally from, and like how long, where has been going, and where you are now.
So my story basically
Yeah.
is what you're asking. Okay, so yeah, I sold my house in Eugene, Oregon. I just knew that I wanted to move on. And so pet sitting was the idea to kind of see the world and try out different countries and see
Right.
where I felt like I fit the best.
Right.
And it was an interesting journey. I mean, I got to spend those 3 weeks in Amsterdam on a
Yeah.
houseboat, which was really cool. And then I went up to Oslo, and I spent 2 months in Vietnam with a cat, and and then Singapore. I was in
Yeah.
Singapore for 2 months cat sitting with different cats,
Yeah.
and just hitting places in between and couch surfing and meeting people and trying to explore different cultures and see if anything felt like a good fit.
How do you feel? Like, I think you went around the world, right? So you went from around all the way to Nordics, then moved to Asia, and then back to some places.
Yeah, I actually went down kind of through Central Europe to Bosnia before I went over to Vietnam. And then I was just so cold in Bosnia, and
Yeah.
and the chance of having free accommodations for 2 months in a warm country was too enticing. So
Yeah.
that's what took me over to Southeast Asia. And then I'd never, other than Japan, I hadn't really been to Asia at all. So it was kind of cool to check out a new corner of the world. I stopped in Thailand
Yeah.
for a week just to check it out.
I always feel like exact opposite. Whenever I hear like there was like a warm thing, I always say like I want cold, dark, damp weather. I had so much summer back in India. I'm like, well, I enjoy this kind of weather. It's just like a great fun to be around this one now.
The cool weather?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like perfect. Like at the when the snow hits, I think a couple of weeks back it snowed here also in Amsterdam. That was like a most fun part. I just walked around in snow whole day. That was great.
Oh gosh. Well, I remember you saying how much people look forward to the sun coming out in the spring. And
Yeah.
how anytime the sun comes out, that everyone's faces just turn up towards the sky like sunflowers.
Yeah, exactly. They all the friend groups basically they just like face the sun and just sitting there, exact up front. So why don't we like talk about a little bit just to set up the thing like oh so before even you like started traveling like how is it like where do you grow up like where were you like most of your childhood and like let's run through like in 1 minute.
Oh, all the way back. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I grew up in Ohio in the Midwest, and then I just always wanted to travel. So I spent my junior year in France, junior year of college, and that just kind of whetted my appetite for getting out and seeing new cultures and meeting new people. And I did teach English in the Czech Republic for 2 years after college. And then I was in Washington, D.C. for 8 years where I had a dog walking business and pet sitting. And
right.
then I moved over to Oregon just because it felt like the right place for me. And after 15 years there, it was just time to move on.
Yeah, so
And
I
then
think
that's when the pet sitting started.
yeah, I guess so. So like if so we hear a lot of things about from coast side, right? Like a east and west coast. How is it
Yeah.
like growing up in Ohio? Like we only hear about like I think in news it comes in like political cycle or something. But if you what is it like yeah distinct memory when you think about like Ohio growing up?
Well, it's funny because we were just talking about snow, and yeah,
Right.
snow really marked my childhood winters, like getting snow days, getting days off school and going sledding and having to shovel the driveway. And one time my dad built us an igloo out of snow, which was a fond memory.
Yeah.
So lots of snow in the wintertime. And then summertime was just kind of free and easy riding bikes. I remember you saying that the image of someone like riding a bike is just such
Yeah.
a happy thing to see. Like there's just something about it. And that's what marked my summers, I would say, was kind of getting out on my bike and going to see friends and
Fair
being
enough. Oh,
free.
what kind of things would you do like when you're growing up like in your like do you have like a big family like what kind of things was it?
Just one brother, and my parents were both teachers. And we would just get together with our friends and play, I guess. I mean, we did some sports, so like I can remember playing softball and basketball and volleyball.
All right. Do you also have to do like some sort of chores that you are like supposed to do or something like that?
Oh, sure, chores. Oh, yeah.
That
With cleaning, my mom was very, very insistent that the house be immaculate at all times. So
right.
there were lots of chores around that, and then sometimes yard work, which I never really liked.
Yeah, that's something like I totally don't miss from my childhood. I'm very happy to get away from as well.
Were you doing a lot of yard work as a kid?
Well,
Or
we had we had like a different kind of things, all kind of like pick up from groceries. You know, like we also had to pick water from bucket, like a drinking water from like supply. That was my duty, and a lot of like picking up vegetables from market. I really dislike, and a lot of like backyard farming kind of thing, to grow some potatoes and stuff. So I did a lot of that. So didn't want to do that anymore. I'm like enough potatoes for my life.
Yeah, yeah. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have three sisters.
And
I'm
so
number
you got probably the heavy manual labor.
yeah. So it was like anything outdoor, like if you have to step out or do some heavy lifting, that's my job. So
Yeah,
go from
yeah.
there. So so like if you so you grew up in Ohio till 16, right? Like how is it like? So one thing I always feel like we study so much, right? 16, 18, 20 years basically like first early on. So it's like to spend like half the life probably just studying things in schools and colleges. What do you think like stands out for you like in terms of your like that studying period maybe just like what's the education system like how do you go from 0 to 16 year olds in terms of schooling?
Well, we went up to 18 for high school, and then you go to college at 18.
Okay.
And then I would say one of my biggest regrets in life is that I went to college in Ohio.
Yeah.
So I wish that I'd gotten out of state earlier in life. But then, like I said, I did spend my junior year in France.
Yeah.
And then I just realized that I could kind of get out on my own. Because wherever you're from, you only know that thing.
Yeah, I agree. That's like my favorite phrase, right? I keep quoting, you don't know what you don't know. Like until
Right.
you have that moment, you don't even know like, oh, I could have just gone to different college, I don't know.
Right. Right, right.
So, how do you decide to go to France? Did you go to Paris, or where did you go?
I went to Orléans, which is in the Loire Valley. It's maybe an hour to Paris by train.
Okay,
Um, and it wasn't quite the year I expected. I really thought that I would go there and just immerse myself in French culture and have all these French friends and never come back,
right.
which actually happened to a friend of mine in Austria. She just got married, had kids. Like she comes back to visit once in a while.
Okay,
And we left at the same time. She went to Salzburg, Austria, and I went to Orléans, France.
yeah.
But I ended up really just drinking a lot of wine and hanging out with my American friends, and so it was a little bit of a disappointment in some ways.
Hmm. Did you feel it was just like it was harder to meet people from when you moved there? Or it was just like it was easy to have a group of people that you knew familiar with.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just the easy thing to do.
Yeah, I guess that's what happens. I see that also. Like a lot of people, they just like go in cohorts. Right? It just like I think it's a safety option. It's kind of like a
Right.
sometimes it feels hard. You go and like try like say hello, and like you don't get like same warm reaction, and they're like, "Oh, I might just be better off in that group that I was with." So it's kind of like hard, I guess, that way.
Yeah. And the French people were so well put together, they were so fashionable and the way they took
Right.
notes in class, like their writing was perfect and they had different colored pens and notebooks for everything. And I think, yeah, I think it just was easier to kind of hang out with known quantities.
Did you had at that time like really struggle with language, or that was like not a key thing? Did you feel?
Yeah, it was easy enough to get around. My parents came to visit when I lived there and I took them around the country and my French was able to kind of get us around.
All right.
But
I just like
obviously it would have been much better if I had been immersed with French friends.
that's definitely like I think one of the harder parts. Like in at least in Netherlands, I feel like that has been much easier. Like you can just do English, but like if you was in Germany or Spain or France, it would have been like so much harder to do this. Talk to like anyone.
Right, right, right. And you're really good about getting out and socializing. Are you still able to do the rowing?
Rowing is
Or
still going on a little bit, but they shut down like 4-person boats or something, so you can do like a single boats, sculling basically.
uh-huh.
But other than that, yeah, the whole thing is shut down here as well.
And I guess it doesn't happen during the winter time as much anyway, right? I mean, it must be so cold.
It is in the cold, yeah. I remember I started like in winter, so my hands will often go like freezing. It's because it's mostly leg kind of like exercise when you do rowing. But yeah, so the trick is like when you are sliding back, you just move your fingers a little bit, and that keeps it like at least alive.
Yeah, yeah, yikes.
So like where we? So France, you go back to Ohio, and then do you go back? Like, what do you study at that point?
Well, I was studying French, so I had 1 year to finish up, and then after that, I went to St. Louis for a volunteer project where
Yeah.
I lived in a boys' home and was just kind of like a big sister, really. Like helped them with their homework, made sure they did their chores, drove them to school, drove them to after school practices. It was pretty fun actually. So I was in
Yeah.
St. Louis for 2 years, and then that's when I went to the Czech Republic
All
for
right.
2 years also. And the Czech
And
Republic was cool, as you
yeah,
as you know.
it is fun. How did the Czech Republic come together? Like, so that was like one of the thing I always like when I was back in India. At least I would always think like, how do you even decide where to go when you have like so many options, right? And so how did it come for you as a Czech
Well,
Republic?
I kind of in life have a maybe bad habit of just waiting for things to fall into my lap. And it
Right.
totally, like a friend did it. And then when she finished, another friend took over for her. And then he said, "This place is great. You got to come see it. I can get you a job." And I was like, "Okay." And I had no idea what I was getting into. I had a little bit of a panic attack on the plane on the way over. Like, what am I doing? I just like, all I did was buy a ticket. I didn't have any
Right.
preparation. But it was one of those feelings, I bet you've had this in life before, where you get to a place and you know that's where you're meant to be. So I
Right.
landed in the Czech Republic and it was like really when I was in the train station, I was like, "Oh yeah." Like this is exactly where I'm meant to be. And it was
Right.
it was a cool experience.
What was the first thing that like just popped up in front of you when you landed there
You mean
in
what
Prague?
did I
Yeah.
see?
Yeah. Like what was the feeling that you got? Like is it like a freedom? What was it?
just that feeling of being where I was meant to be, and a feeling of excitement, obviously, adventure and someplace new. I th-
Right.
I think people have different personality styles, and I know I just really love when things are new. Like I love a big, exciting change
Yeah.
that I've done myself. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it's not exciting when it's like a pandemic and suddenly everyone has to like be on lockdown.
That's true. It's like, yeah, it has been a tough one. But so like if and then you go to Prague. Or was it like you already finished like a school at the like a university at that point? You're already working, or was it like exchange kind of thing?
No, I was already out of college, so it was just a friend got me a teaching job in a small town, maybe 2 hours from Prague by train. And it was just great because I was immersed. I was in this little town that didn't have any stoplights when I first got there. And the grocery stores were all named like grocery store number one, grocery store number two. They didn't have like the fancy Western
Right.
things, which
Yeah.
started to creep in during my
Yeah.
2 years there. But yeah, it was a great experience. I had really cool students and just a great time.
Do you feel it was already like very different than like what you expect in US or even France, let's say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And
I
I wish
think.
I wish instead of coming back to the States and then just being in the States for the next like 20 years, I wish I'd kept on with like exploring new cultures because it really was maybe 25 years before I got back out and started traveling. And that's why like then I kind of did it big.
Mm,
That's why I was like, okay, I'm just going to go wherever the wind takes me.
true. And then you like took the whole. I think. So where do you go afterwards? So there goes your Czech Republic. Then you go back to US. I think. Uh,
And I had a plane ticket. I actually bought a plane ticket to JFK, New York, and
yeah.
I didn't know anyone in New York. So I didn't really have a plan even for when I landed. So I remember landing and being like, okay, well, how much does it cost to get to my brother was living in Washington, DC. So that's where I ended up going was just to like hang out with my brother. And then I got an apartment and a job and stayed there for the next 8 years.
All right. How is DC in that case? How do you feel when you're there?
DC never felt like home to me. I mean, it was
Okay.
great when I was pet sitting and dog walking and, I was in my 20s and it was fun to go out, see
Yeah.
live bands and meet new people, but DC never really felt like home. And Oregon had that same sense of like, oh, okay, this is where I'm meant to be.
Okay.
So it's happened
And
a few times in my life.
yeah, I think that's what you need to follow. Like when you get the feeling, you just chase it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So um, so how do you get into interested into pets generally? Do you always were into pets or
Well, I've always loved dogs and I wasn't allowed to have a dog until I was in high school. Maybe we got a dog. And then pet sitting was like, well, why would I own a dog when I can just get paid to take other people's dogs out all day? Like if I were a millionaire,
right?
I would get a bunch of dogs and I would hang out at the park. And I was like, here I am with a bunch of dogs hanging out at the park and somehow my bills are getting paid. So that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Oregon, I got my own dog and then I was like, well, this is different. Like I can see why people own their own dogs.
Hmm. What do you feel was different? What was good about it?
Oh, it's just so cool having a companion there all the time and just like such a best friend and someone who's always happy to see you when you get home and
Right.
someone you can take out hiking and we just had great adventures.
Should not have a cat then, I suppose.
No, no. Not quite the same for me.
Which dog was it for you?
How do you mean?
What was it was like a I don't know.
What type of dog?
Yeah, what type of dog?
Yeah, she was from the pound, but she was a Rhodesian Ridgeback mix.
Okay.
So I don't know. Ridgebacks are like really big, strong dogs, and I had a lot of those when I was dog walking in Washington, D.C., and I just really love the breed. They're gentle and smart and good looking and really calm, but they can also hike as long as you want to hike. So
Right. It's a
she,
little bit like I saw like some pictures. It's like a really big dog, right?
right.
It sometimes like really steps out at you that it's such a big, but sometimes they're like so gentle. Uh,
Yeah.
because like I was always like super afraid of like big dogs when I'll see like they're going to bite me, especially if you come from India, it's there are like a lot of stray dogs, and
Right.
the moment it goes from day to night, it feels like they're turning to this like biting, scary creatures who is just
Sure.
out there to get you. So anytime I'll go for a run in the evening, I'll see like two big dogs with like a tiny lady. I'm like, oh no, I'm not sure you can take it.
That is funny.
So
But that
dogs.
makes sense, though. I mean, the stray dogs in India do bite people, don't they?
Well,
I mean, are they
they're
dangerous?
they're more barking type than biting type. But like they say, the clouds that thunder a lot, they don't really rain, kind of thing. So it's that kind of theory, I suppose. But it does get into your psyche, I suppose.
Yeah, and you don't have that friendly association with them.
Nope. Although I did grow up with like two little dogs. I think it's Familian. It's that's like
Uh-huh.
these white fluffy dogs of two of them. They were at my house when I was growing up early on, but then there was no space at home, so we just moved them somewhere else, and that was no
Yeah.
dog.
It's funny how you can kind of get a dog type. I was just talking about that with an Australian friend of mine here in Mexico City,
Yeah.
and she said she just is always drawn to Chihuahuas, like Chihuahua
Mm,
mixes. Not even like she doesn't like pure Chihuahuas, she likes the
right.
mixes. And she said when she met her dog, she just knew that was her soulmate.
Hmm. Fair enough.
And that's how I felt about my dog too. So it's kind of funny. And even being a dog person or a cat person, how does that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I could understand like historical was a reason, but now it's like I was also like currently I'm like doing a bunch of research for like companies, and also, and it seems like it's a big thing, like as like generations as it changing, like younger people over the time have much more, there's a humanization concept, like people really like pets are like humans, they treat them, you feed them, everything, so it's not that transaction anymore, that it's just for for me, and they just like take care of it. So it's really becoming probably companionship at this point, probably more than any other human in their lives.
Yeah. There's not any sort of like negativity or mixed emotions with the dog. It's just straightforward. Like it's just a good exchange, I think. So one of the dogs at the shelter is an 8-year-old greyhound mix that I've just been bringing to my house during the day. So I go in the morning and pick her up and I bring her to my house, and it's just like having my own dog, and she's calm and quiet.
Yeah.
Um, but her story is that she apparently here in Mexico, and I don't know if this is still a thing, but at least 8 years ago, when they were in vet school, they had to take a dog off the streets and do an operation on the dog and then put the
Oh.
dog down, which is horrifying to me.
That's a bad start to vet career.
Yeah. But so this dog, she apparently was 4 or 5 months old. She was just a little puppy taken off
Yeah.
the streets, had her appendix removed, and then instead of putting her down, this guy took her to the shelter. So
That's
she's been
nice.
at the shelter for 8 years, and she's just the sweetest, most gentle, calmest dog. She just comes here and she goes right to her spot and goes to sleep
Okay.
and
That's
then
that's
sleeps for
nice.
the whole day, and then I take her back. It's so great.
Are you staying like an Airbnb or something, or you just
No,
like a?
no, I really actually signed a lease.
All right. And
Yeah.
how do it work? Like, is it like a long term, or you just like a monthly thing?
It's 6 months. It's a year's lease, but I can get out of it after 6 months if I give 30 days notice.
Oh
So
yeah, that's
I'm
fair.
kind of on the hook until May, but I really love the place. I mean, it's the perfect location. It's got a great view. It's right on the park. It's just like a studio. It's a good space for me.
All right. How are you able to like move around also in the city generally? It's a New Mexico City around and do things.
Because of the pandemic, I've really just been staying in a little bubble. Like I really just walk to the shelter and back and go to the dog park. I have a few friends here that I've met through the shelter,
Yeah,
and sometimes we'll go to the dog park. We're just always wearing masks. And I was eating out when I first got here, but now that I have a kitchen, and we were under a stricter lockdown where the restaurants were doing takeout only
yeah,
for about a month, and then I just got out of the habit of eating out. So now I just cook at home.
fair enough. Well, like one thing is
I'm
also,
I, I'm
yeah,
curious.
yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to ask in Amsterdam what the situation is like. I know people, I heard of demonstrations in the Netherlands and people getting restless, being tired
Yeah,
of.
yeah, I think it's like, it's fluctuation kind of thing. They go on and off, on and off. It's just like up for a few months, maybe it was okay, but over the time, people just get agitated. It's like, now we know what happened. And also like probably seeing all the news from like different across the pond, maybe that has some impact as well, gets people like, well, there's something. So the thing was like in summer, it was almost like everything was kind of open with the small restrictions. But as the winter came, like I think the numbers are going up, and they were a little bit afraid of UK variant as well. So what they did is like they did much stricter lockdowns in early December that go back to whole thing, and because the numbers were still not going down, and I don't know, there's some blame to probably for government also for vaccination rollout, and something is slow, it's not really going fast, and to probably that add up with like they're like, well, we still want to get numbers and control, but we are not going to do it vaccination fast enough probably. So they're like, well, we are going to do curfew now. So now from 8:13 night to 4:13 morning, it's kind of a curfew time.
And
uh,
is it enforced?
it's forced, yeah, highly. Like first 2 days, I think they fined like 4,000 people and arrested. There was a protest and they arrested 200 people. And so people really got riled up on the curfew thing. Apparently, it's the first time since World War II that the Netherlands has a curfew.
Wow.
So probably that's really, yeah. I think it's mostly young people or something who like kind of like pent up energy or like need to do something now and
Yeah.
not
When
able
you
to.
go out on the streets, are people wearing masks?
No, here it's not mandatory to wear outside. Only like I think by law it's not mandatory. You government can't force you to wear a mask apparently. So it's shops and stuff. They strongly encourage to do it, but shops generally tell like, well, please wear a mask when you come in. So people do follow that one pretty strictly actually.
Good, good, good.
Yeah, but like outdoor also is pretty restricted right now. You can only be with one person at a time who is not from household. You can only have one visitor at house. So like these kind of lockdowns.
And how do they enforce that?
Well, again, I don't think they can really, but they are like big fines if you break
Uh-huh.
it in some way. So like fear is a big motivator for people to follow the protocol, I guess.
Yeah. It's
So
it's been interesting to see the different, because I was in Singapore when everything kind of broke.
yeah,
And Singapore, at the time, they weren't saying to wear masks. They were just
yeah,
saying if you're sick, wear a mask, but otherwise don't wear a mask. So my life was pretty normal in Singapore through January, February. And then in March, I went to Indonesia for a week. And
yeah,
Indonesia was saying, we don't have it here. Everything's fine.
right,
But people
right,
were coughing everywhere. I mean, they were worried about the tourism industry.
right.
I was terrified. I was like, it's definitely here and nobody's being careful about anything. And I felt really panicked the whole week I was there. I just was looking for a plane ticket to get back to the US because that's when borders were starting to close. And I was like,
Right.
I do not want to be stuck here. And and then in the US, they didn't even take my temperature coming into the airport in March, mid-March. They weren't even doing temperature checks or
Yeah,
asking.
I think they started much later because it was not real until it started happening in Italy, right? So when Italy really was struggling, that's when US noticed like, oh, we should do something about it.
But are they? I'm not sure they're even taking, because then I went from Oregon to Ohio in June and I don't think they were taking temperatures then either. Not
Uh,
sure about that.
well,
But in
it was
Ohio,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, it was just like late March, I think, around here also, I think if I remember 18th or 20th March, we first went work from home and all the things. So
Uh-huh.
it must have been after that in US also probably.
Maybe, but in Ohio, the whole time I was there from mid-June to mid-October, nobody's wearing masks.
Yeah,
Maybe in the grocery stores because that's the only place I went inside, but like I would go out to the parks just
yeah.
to take walks and no one's wearing masks and people are jogging right next to you. And oh, so when I got to Mexico City, I was really impressed because so many people were wearing masks, but it's also such a tightly confined place. I mean, you really can't get away from the people who aren't wearing masks.
Yeah,
And so I think Mexico is actually doing pretty badly from what I hear. I
yeah,
mean, it's hard to know how much they're testing and how much they're reporting, but it sounds like we're doing pretty badly. So I'm
yeah.
doing my best to really just go grocery shopping and
Is it officially also like full lockdown there, or how are the numbers looking?
The numbers look awful. I mean, I'm not even really following them anymore.
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
a
same here.
strict lockdown, and then, of course, businesses, the restaurant industry really objected. And
Hmm.
finally, Mexico City said, "Okay, well, you can stay open until 4:30." And the restaurant industry said, "Okay, thanks for letting us stay open until 6:30." So they're open until 6:30 now,
Okay.
and they've opened some more things like stationers were able to open. A couple other things that are kind of non-essential were allowed to open just from pressure
Hmm.
from
Well,
businesses.
I guess that's the thing, right? So similar to like in Europe, also it's pretty good. Like I think I saw the policies the government is kind of like doing pretty good in terms of how they support. Everything has like a good social flow. So like I think people are much more complying to the rules because they have like a kind of strong support as a subsidies and stuff getting. So they're like, all right, we'll shut it down.
Right.
But in these kind of countries, especially I also noticed like in India and other kind of places, you don't have any flow. Like when you shut down, you just go to zero. So what are you going to do? So these people
Right.
really have hard time probably.
Yeah. Now I heard India was actually doing fairly well.
Well, if I understand correctly, they basically have stopped all the restrictions. Apparently, like everything is like just do it now. But again, numbers also it's always tricky with how accurate the numbers also are coming out of India. From my lived experience, I don't think you can have that precise tracking of all these things. Like rule following is not the strong way that it happens. So there's a lot of margin of error.
Hmm.
So
I felt like at first it was kind of interesting to watch the numbers, but then they just got so like beyond the realm of what your mind can process. Like now
yeah.
I see the numbers and I'm like, okay, that doesn't even compute for me."
Yeah, I mean, like early on, it was kind of like a new thing and interesting for first month or two. I was like, well, let me read what the research is happening, how the vaccinations, how does it work, how does the like COVID, like how does the virus work. At some point, you're just like zone out. It's like, well, now it's just like a factor of life. So just like you just numb to it.
Yeah. It's almost like let me know when it's done.
Right, right. I mean, like there's like you feel like sometimes you have to, I guess, because if you feel like you feel helpless, right? There's nothing you feel like you can do, like other than
Right.
like stay strong and like do take care of mental health, just do workouts, and that's it. What can you really
Yeah.
do?
So
So,
what are you doing for mental health? Are you able to socialize at all?
well, not so much. So mostly it's like. Uh, talk to my girlfriend basically that helps a lot do workout that's really a big deal that if can go for like running or rowing or stuff like that that's really like doing things regularly is helpful and
And
try
are
to
you
do
still doing that every day like you were before?
yeah so you can't do like all the things because I used to do a lot of these sports kind of activities but everything is
Yeah,
shut down so
right.
well basic vanilla rowing and running that's two things at least possible
Uh-huh.
so so
And
that's keeping a little bit sane.
is your girlfriend in Amsterdam?
Yeah, yeah. She's from Amsterdam, so that helps.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
you're able to
otherwise,
see her.
I'm able to see her. Yeah,
Yeah,
otherwise it would have been
nice,
like
nice,
much
nice.
harder. So
Yeah.
like that kind of like there was like also I was thinking like might be interesting structure from like just how do you see the role of government basically like in these kind of things, especially compared like we hear so much in terms of like U.S. news and stuff like how is that? Given your lived experience, what do you think of government just from your point of view?
Well, I loved Singapore. I know Singapore gets a bad rap for being kind of an authoritarian state, but I felt like when I was there, things just worked well. You were safe. Everything, like you could count on things being on time and everything was clean. I really liked that. Like, I don't mind following rules. And then in the US, it's like, yeah, we've got our freedom, but like, it's terrifying. I mean,
Right,
it's out of control with COVID and with also just people carrying guns and
right,
being militant about their freedoms, like their freedom to not wear a mask when
right.
they're coming in close contact with you. So I also think we'll see a difference between, I mean, Trump really ran the COVID numbers up. I remember early on him saying like, it's nothing to worry about. And really he maintained that the whole year, his
Yeah.
stance that COVID was nothing to be afraid of. So I see already Biden has done, you now have to have a COVID test if you want to fly into the US,
Yeah.
which should have been done a long time ago.
Yeah.
And you're also meant to quarantine. So I don't know how that's being enforced. I don't think it can be enforced.
Hmm.
But I think that Biden signed an order saying that there's a mandatory 14-day quarantine for people coming into the US, which makes
Hmm.
travel for me a little more difficult because I was hoping to go to Oregon at some point to get my things and get a vaccine, but I'm all for it. I mean, I'll go through the extra hurdles because I want to be safe and I want everyone else to be safe too. So
Hmm.
that's just me. I know there's definitely lots of people who'd rather just be in a free place where they can do whatever they want. And
But like fundamentally, if you think, do you feel like so one thing like I always was when I talk to people, right? In Europe, kind of like at least it feels like fundamentally people believe government is good, like they believe in government. Do you feel that's the case from your experience that like things you grew up around that people felt like government is there for a purpose? It's like, well, it's just something should be like go away from our ways.
growing up in Ohio, I know that my parents, especially my dad especially, has a somewhat naive view that the government would never do anything to hurt us.
Okay.
So he believes that politicians are like generally good people and are acting in our best interests at all times. So I
Yeah.
think that's a little naive.
Right.
And I just think what we saw with Trump was like they're not always acting in our best interests. And
Right.
again, there's plenty of people that would disagree with me. So
Hmm. Fair enough. But at this point you feel like it's pretty okay to but like, well, again, I guess depending on who is in charge or something, probably it changes.
exactly. Yeah. Because I'm starting to feel like we can have a little more confidence with Biden in charge, but it's such a bipartisan country now. It's like you're on one side or the other.
Yeah.
And you can't really see the other person's perspective at all.
Right. Which is like I also like sometimes when I have a discussion, right? So I have like tendency to take exact opposite side of someone whatever they say, so it just makes it interesting, but it
Uh-huh.
also it's kind of like a way to, but if someone is not in that frame where like you're not being supportive or something, that makes it very hard. So it feels like
Right.
it's kind of like a necessary thing if you want to do something new, to have like this strong opposition. But if you're not have that what you call safety, where you feel like other person has the best of interest in and they are asking the like wrong things or debating you strongly because they want to do good things, it's just not possible to make it work, I think.
Right. You're
So
going to have such interesting conversations on this podcast. You said, how many people did you say you've met through couch surfing?
it must be more than 100, but hosted like 50 people maybe.
In Amsterdam alone or in different places?
Mostly Amsterdam because I'm here, but when I travel
Hmm.
also I will meet up with some people whenever I go, so that was always interesting to see local things with local people.
Yeah. Are you still on couch surfing?
No, couchsurfing went like really big downhill last year because
Sure.
so couchsurfing was before Airbnb, right? That was their like a idealistic model that will now monetize it properly, and it's like all for each other kind of thing. Um,
Right.
but what happened, like when these things happen and they didn't run financials pretty well, so at some point they were like, well, we're out of money. And they suddenly put up like a big paywall on the website and services that
Right.
you have to pay now. And people are like super like, why didn't you plan it well? Why didn't you, like one day there was nothing and one day you just like force people to do it? So it has kind of like a, and you can't really host people right now. No one's really traveling, so there's
Right.
not much to do.
Right. And the paywall wasn't much. I mean, it was very affordable, but at the same time, I felt like if I wasn't traveling, then what would be the use of it? Like
Right.
if I started traveling again, probably I would pay.
Well, it's kind of like the people also, right? So maybe the hosts or something, they might be feel like offended. I'm already offering service or something. And if you look at from the guest side, guests, if you I don't know, if you host someone, people are really running on shoestring budget. So like a lot of times it's about like meeting new people and something, but the fundamental like it's not sufficient, but it's a necessary to have like housing, and So people really, instead of 20 euros hostels, they're looking for something free, and then they can do something a little bit on. So that was like a key factor. And if you take away that factor, it kind of like it starts getting to people.
Yeah.
But yeah, but like also like curious, did you grow up in a religious family, or how was it?
My town?
Yeah, like your family, what was it like? You were a little bit religious, or not so much?
Oh, religious. Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, my parents are very strict Catholics,
Okay.
and I was forced to go to mass every Sunday, and I hated it.
Yeah.
I just hated that I was never given any sort of a choice. It wasn't even like, do you want to sit? We always sat in the front row. So it
Right.
wasn't like I was even given a choice of like, do you want to sit in the middle? Would it be better if we went to a later mass? Because we would go to 7:30 mass in the morning, and
Right.
it's like, as a kid having to get up at like 6:30 to go do something you hated to do.
Yep.
I mean, I can remember actually being in tears because I was just so miserable,
Yeah.
and there
But
was
but
just no choice around it.
but do you feel like this at that point, as it was happening, also you just disliked it, other than like the waking up? I don't think I can do it either in my life again. That like it's for schools, they always have to start like 7 in the morning or something. I never want to
Right,
do it. But other than that,
right.
like, did you feel it in the moment that it was like, no, I don't want to do this like thing just as a chore, or it was like religion part of thing that's really kind of like annoying?
It just never made sense to me. Like, why are we being forced to go every week to like repeat these things and sing these things? Like, also the singing wasn't very good. Like, I was never a good singer. No one in our whole church was a good singer. So it was like these awful songs and these things we had to say, and you had to stand up and sit down and kneel, and it didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it still doesn't really. But I know that for my parents, it's a really good connection. Like they've
Right.
got other family members that go to church. They make friends through their church.
Yeah.
My brother didn't never hated it as much as I did. And now he's a Unitarian, which is a church that makes a lot more sense to me. They're more focused on human rights, and
Okay.
they're much more liberal and open-minded. And so I can understand his wanting to join that community. But
Hmm.
for me, I, I I did some go to some Quaker services when I lived in Washington, D.C., because they're really like, you go and everyone just sits quietly in the same room. I think it's the coolest thing.
Right. Okay. I also like I was also thinking that so I also grew up in like very religious family, right? So my parents are Hindu, but at that point I just felt like it's a chore, but I didn't like have that like strong context of like, is it like a thing or something, just like a ritual? You do two things during the day. You like have these incensed candles that you light up for the morning and evening, and that was it. That was kind of like a limit to what meant for me. And festivals, like festivals are all about
Uh,
food compared to the others, like
sure.
playing part was for mom, but I'll just focus on the fun stuff. So it's only like in like a retrospect, I feel like, well, maybe could have thought about this thing, but again, like when you're growing up, I didn't think of these things, so that was kind of like a different. Uh, but one key thing, like as I learned in like afterwards, like all these things like the church and these things especially, they were not just like a religious reason, like they're like a bundle of services. You have a community there, people used to find work there, people used to find I don't know, just have a meditation, if you want to call it. That's again the same kind of thing, just in a different
Right.
setting, right? So do you feel something along the line gets lost when you like atomize all these things? Like is so group kind of made it together, right? If you're Catholic, you have like 7 things out of 10 that you can guess about each other. Like, well, we have this common system probably underlying. But now that if you spin it like, well, there's Trish, there's Sitesh, there's someone else. So in each person is like different. Do you think that makes it kind of like a harder to have a common, like a framework, how we deal with each other?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, I was just thinking like, so what do you think, what was it something good that you feel in retrospect was from your, like going through that religious experience?
Something that was like, I get what my parents get out of it,
Yeah.
but I just never did. And I think it's
Mm.
just like that wasn't the right framework for me. And
Mm.
like I said, the Quaker service really was like much more meditative, because you were just sitting and like kind of sitting with your own thoughts.
Right.
Whereas the Catholic Church was like, you just went and you said what other people, like you said what you had to say,
Yeah.
and it was an hour. It was an hour every week.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
I think different things just work for different. You know, my parents after mass, they go out to breakfast with my cousin and her family, and I understand how it works for them, but it just never did for me. And even
Fair.
actually, until I was like maybe 30, I was still like, if I went home to visit, I had to go to mass. There was no choice.
I see. I see. And how does that like map up to like a extended, let's say, society? Like, how do you feel at that point? Did you feel like um, how was the experience with dealing with society generally around you that you grew up in?
Well, I mean, society being school, right? When you're growing up, I mean, it's your friends and
That's a big part of it, but also like family and friends of family and neighbors probably like because like just to give a comparison, so from my experience, like the neighbors were like your extended kind of family. So it's
uh,
like everyone is kind of like looking out for you as well as looking over you. So it's kind of like both things go hand in hand. So there are like some good things. You just step out and like say hello neighbor, and then you have this immediate thing. But now like I don't even know my neighbors anymore. So it's kind of
oh,
like
you don't?
well, I met my personal neighbors, but not really. Like these days, like I don't know next building and this building, who are the people in that one. So
Uh-huh.
so that was the kind of thing. Did you feel like in your experience it was like, well, that was not really a factor in terms of how you like evolve or as a person, like so much that you have to care about what society in back level is thinking.
Yeah, I don't think I ever worried too much about what society thought. I mean, in terms of neighbors, like we knew our neighbors. There weren't many kids on our block, so that was difficult.
Yeah.
But I mean, we knew our neighbors, but I don't think it was that same sense of they were looking out for us as you probably had in India.
Mm, fair enough.
And I think that's one of the downsides of a society where it's focused on the individual and everyone's kind of focused on their own families. And I think that's one thing that bothered me about Catholicism was that, I wasn't able to verbalize it at the time, but I just felt like everyone was focused on their own family,
Right.
and doing the right thing just meant doing this awful like hour of sitting and standing and kneeling and reciting things.
Right.
It just didn't make any sense to me. Whereas I think it would have made more sense if I'd grown up in a place where people looked out for each other and being good meant like not harming others and being nice to others.
Right. 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 Fair enough.
But like we said, you only know what you grow up with, and so it can feel not right to you, but you don't know what right is.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then
How is
going back to just like different societies, like there's kind of in Asia, there's more of a kind of group mentality and looking out for what's best for the group.
right,
Whereas in the US, it's really like you're looking out for yourself and maybe your family.
right, right. Did you feel that like when you traveled outside US, did you get that vibe when interactions or meeting with people right away that this is kind of like actually true, group versus individual kind of setup?
I, I'm not sure I understand that question either.
Like so this is like a common thing. I also agree that like if you go like in India or Asia generally, that's like very much is a group first, individual second, kind of like a decision
Right.
process when you have to. Did you feel that like very clearly that when like even in US that's like individual first and then other things come together after that?
Yeah, I think when I started traveling, I did notice that more. I mean, France obviously was pretty similar to the US, and even the Czech Republic wasn't noticeable. But when I went to Japan,
Right.
it did feel different in that sense of there
Hmm.
was definitely more of a kind of group mentality. Even just in terms of looking for Airbnbs, so many of the Airbnbs were set up for like 8 people. And I was like,
Right.
what about someone that's just traveling by themselves? There's really just not, I mean, there were hostels and the hostels were pretty great, but um even like I know my friend who's Japanese, she and her husband and their son lived with her mother and sister in a one-bedroom apartment.
Right.
And they were fine with it because it was just like they were used to kind of being in tight quarters and looking out for each other, I guess.
Well, that's true. Did you have like a private room growing up?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And it
So
wasn't even a big house, but yeah, I had my own, of course.
yeah,
And
that's the difference, right? So like I remember we were like six people in two room house. So
yeah,
that was me for till 15. That was like life. So it just so whenever I will go to like center of Amsterdam and people were like, oh, so many tourists here. They really bad wanted to get rid of tourists. I'm like, where are people? I don't see people.
that's
Looks
funny. And then how does living alone then feel to you?
Well, that was a kind of like it was like you get like extra space to like now you really have to figure out the stuff for yourself compared to just like because I always felt like I was super tracked in terms of what you have to do. Like I felt like either duty or tracking, like school finished, and I knew I have to two choices: engineering or doctor. If you really want to get that shot at like getting out of the lower middle class or up there, had a clear choice, get to engineering school. But first, when I got off engineering school, then I was like, now I have a job, and now it's open-ended thing. I don't know what to do now. It's just like
Was
on me.
was it was it more exciting or more kind of daunting and overwhelming?
Well, it was super exciting because now you actually have money and you actually have time and energy to do things. So I was like,
Yeah,
well, that's so after 1 year, basically, like, that was my first call. I will call to my dad who worked for like 20 to 60, 40 years in the same company. And like
yeah,
after 1 year, I'm like, I don't know what to do now. It's 1 year. I think I need to change something. this
yeah,
is this is getting to me. And and he starts laughing. I'm like, well, you have to plan now. So I'm like, well, okay, let's make a small plan, 1 year plans at a time, and then look at this vaguely like this is kind of direction. It'd be interesting to go and just make stuff up. Like there's no real like all the meanings of life, all the questions start coming in, and like well, now just have to figure out. That's the cost of independence, probably. If you want freedom, you get that extra ownership also. You can't say like, well, my parents didn't tell me what to do. Like you chose
yeah,
this.
yeah.
So
Well, I remember when you bought your apartment, your condo when I was in Amsterdam, like
oh
that
yeah,
week or the week after. And I remember you saying that you just like you weren't sure how to furnish it.
yeah. I have no idea. It's just like looking at IKEA and talking to some friends also, and my girlfriend also. She helped a lot. Otherwise, I don't think it would have been possible. But you really have to like buying a house. Like I wrote about it, and like it's a decision process. Like, okay, what do I want in the house? Like, is it
Yeah,
how much energy can I put? Like, should it look like? Is it so all these things that you I never had to because like, well, I'll just rent it and like, well, whatever it is, I just adjust to that.
right,
And now you're like, well, now you when you want to freedom, like go make a choice. Everything is a choice. Not choosing also is a choice.
right.
So go do that. So it's
But
interesting.
buying in a foreign country is impressive. I mean, I think even renting, like, I rented this place and it's beautiful, but then it was like the plumbing doesn't work and the
Right.
landlord's like, well, you need to call the plumber. And I was like, why do I need to call the plumber? Like, isn't that why I'm renting?
Well, that has been like a good part till now that when I was looking for a house, one of the criteria was like, well, it should be ready to move. I don't want to do any work, at least to start with, and it should be like ready for a few years without major repair or refurbishing or anything.
Right.
So it has been okay. It's been holding till now. So
Good, good, good.
fingers crossed.
And it's in a great neighborhood, isn't it? Pretty central.
Yeah, it is pretty like a real inner circle kind of thing, and there's a close to like there's a university campus just opposite, and there's a zoo also, so good animals around.
And you were hosting up until the pandemic. You were hosting people there?
No, I think around like after since you I met you around end of that year, probably I slowed down 2019 end of it kind of
Uh-huh.
time. So this was already slowing down. Like yeah. So we'll see how it continues afterwards.
Yeah, do you think you'll pick up again with couchsurfing once the pandemic's over?
Um let's
Like
see.
next year,
Like
I guess.
yeah, next year maybe we'll see. I don't know. It's kind of like a yeah like when I first moved in it was like a lot of energy like let's meet a new person and a new
Yeah,
country, but after like meeting some people you start like seeing like well they're like a common patterns things. It's like so I think over the time I'm also shifting like well it's maybe interesting to have like group of people with deeper compared to like a lot of people with small connection. So
right, right.
so 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 that's something my 2021 mantra as well, like try to get to that point where you have that at least. And
Deeper connections, you mean?
yeah, yeah. that's something probably we all learned last year. Like there's all these like great systems that are out there. It's great, but
Yeah.
then sometimes you're like, well, I don't know. I want to talk to someone. And like you can't pick up phone and call someone randomly. It's kind of like a weird. So so that was kind of like, well, need to focus on that also a little bit and see. So what do you think at this point? So if you have to look back and think, what do you think your life principles are then? Easier question.
My life principles, I guess I would say independence, since I seem to be kind of always off running on my own, and then kind of just always challenging myself. Like I would say the last year was not all sunshine and puppies in terms of like just traveling around. It sounds so great. Oh yeah, I went from Amsterdam to Oslo and Prague, and um, it was a little unsettling not to have a home base and not to know
Right,
where I was headed.
right.
But it was a good challenge, and there were lots of silver linings, and I'm happy that I've ended up here for now, and looking forward to seeing what's coming in the next year. Hopefully it's good stuff.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Are you picking up some salsa also in Mexico or something like that?
Some salsa dancing?
Yeah,
No.
no. Good time. Good time to just start picking up maybe if you're
Yeah,
into.
yeah. I'm working on the language a little bit, but I haven't signed up for an official course yet. I'm doing like a couple free courses
Yeah,
and just practicing on my own and using Duolingo also.
yeah,
But there's not a lot of interacting with people because I'm not really going out. So
yeah.
I'm just taking
Fair.
it slow.
Do you speak
Take,
you speak other languages also like
well, a little French and a little Czech from living in those places. And then I studied Japanese just on Duolingo for a few years. So like a smattering of Japanese.
okay, that's interesting. Like, how do you feel like it when you because like a lot of people think language defines kind of like a thinking process, right? Linguistics is kind of like a background on which like we think about things. Do you think you feel something different when? But do you still think in English, probably, right? If you have
Oh
to
yeah,
say, right?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But
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 I do love using my brain. I think that's one thing that happened in Oregon, and I started to get depressed and kind of just frustrated with life because I wasn't using my brain for anything. I mean, my job
right,
was easy
right,
and there weren't any kind of mental challenges, and that's when I started studying Japanese, and that helped a lot.
yeah. Did you
I
feel like
also Oh, go ahead.
yeah, do you feel like you picked up something when you like learned a different language, like Czech or the French or the Japanese? Did you feel there was different part of brain being activated by them?
Yeah, sure. And the interesting thing too is if I don't know a word in Spanish, sometimes like the Czech word will come up. And in rare instances like Japanese. So there is definitely a section of my brain that's in charge of languages.
Hmm, interesting. Do you think like there's specific like your like mental models are shaped by being from an English speaking country?
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's it's such a privilege to be able to go anywhere in the world and mostly be able to communicate in your native language.
Right,
And and on the flip side is that languages don't come naturally.
right.
Like here, I was at a furniture store because I rented an unfurnished apartment, so I had to buy some furniture. And I asked the guy if he spoke English, and he said, "Of course." Well, not a lot of Mexicans speak English. So I was like, "Well, don't say of course." And he was like, "Well, okay, but I'm from the Netherlands." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well then of course." He probably
Yeah,
speaks 5 other languages with total fluency.
yeah.
So there's definitely pros and cons. I mean, it's easier, but it's easier when everyone speaks your language, but then you're never challenged to have to learn another language. So your
Mhm.
brain gets soft.
That's true. If also like, what do you think? Like your most interesting, um, like food is something that I also find like super interesting, right? Like that's kind of like us. We have spent so much energy like figuring out what kind of things goes where, what kind of taste. What's your like best memories of food or drinks?
In my life,
Yeah, yeah.
that's maybe too broad a question, but I would say that recently, so when I was in Vietnam, I went vegan. And
Oh,
so my diet's pretty limited now. I also was gluten-free before that. So um, It's fairly limited at this point. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
There's some great vegan restaurants, but like I said, I haven't been going out here in Mexico City. Um,
Mexico must have
but
been
yeah, I
hardcore
love,
being vegan, I think.
no, they've got great
No?
restaurants. Yeah, and they
Okay.
understand veganism and they understand gluten-free too.
Okay.
Well, I should say they understand veganism if you're at a vegan restaurant. So some of the, like, I've gone to a couple places that haven't been vegan and then stuff has come
Right.
out with like cheese on it. Um, but yeah,
Now,
I love to eat, so there's definitely some stuff that I miss. But
what's the classic food do you think that you grew up around? What's like a
growing up, a lot of like, I mean, I loved pizza, like anything with cheese and carbs.
right?
The typical
I
American diet. And my parents still like, since I was there over the summer, I was just so sad to see them eating the same things, you know?
it's funny. Like I never knew like how good a variety of cheese can be. We have like one kind of cheese here back in India common. It's paneer. It's kind of
Right,
custard.
right.
And that
Yeah, I
was
know
like
it.
a key source. And since I came here, I'm like a big cheese person now. And I go and like pick up two kind of cheese every 3 days. And like I'm like, how do I know this thing?
Yeah, yeah, Europe's pretty decent for cheese.
It is, and that's like one thing. I'm pretty okay to cut down, like like being vegetarian and something. But cheese is something I feel like I need more time with that to really decide on that front.
Yeah, there are some good cheeses. So there's one place here in Mexico City that sells good vegan cheeses. So I've been able to do okay with that. I do miss milk a little bit because I haven't
Yeah.
found a good, like I can make my own like cashew milk or almond milk or coconut milk, but I miss being able to just make hot chocolate from regular milk.
Did you grow up around farms or something, or they lived around
No,
farms?
but you know the meat and dairy industries are so subsidized by the government that that's just what you eat because it's cheap.
Right.
So if the government subsidized like organic fruits and vegetables, we'd all be healthier because we just eat whatever's cheapest and easiest.
True.
So I did get a lot healthier in Oregon because there's just much more access to healthy foods
Mm, that's true.
and more people that eat that way, and then even restaurants that just serve healthy foods. Whereas in Ohio, I was like, where you are there vegetables? Like, where do you guys get? And I think a lot of the US is like that, and other countries
Oh,
too, really.
yeah, probably true. Which one will be like your favorite spot? I think maybe like if you have to choose any place in US to live, where will you choose to live?
That's a tough question. I mean, I really loved Oregon. I mean, I don't think I would go back and live there again, but maybe because it's a pretty cool place.
Yeah.
I mean, Colorado's neat, but it's like it's just stuck in the middle of the country and it's so cold in the wintertime.
Right.
And I really just I don't there's just really no place in the US that I want to be
Hmm.
for
But like
long term.
from the places you have lived, you'll say like Oregon is the best one there for you.
Oregon's really cool. Yeah, if you get
Oh,
a chance to visit the States, like if you enjoy nature,
right.
being outside, I mean, there's just gorgeous scenery and you can get from the coast to the mountains in a couple hours. It's a
Well,
beautiful state.
how will you define like the city basically? Like so nature is like a very like a plateau, a mountainy. What kind of thing is it? Do they have?
In the town that I lived in,
Yeah.
is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was situated right between the coast and the mountains, and it was hilly, and there were just bike paths and hiking trails and outdoorsy people.
Hmm. Interesting. Do you
It
think
was
like that? Do you think
a
that also has like a kind of like a impact on like how it kind of like shapes it? Kind of what kind of geography you hang out around? Is it plateau or ocean or what kind of it is?
oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I suppose like in Ohio, there just wasn't really any place rugged to get to.
Right.
So there was no incentive to really be much of a hiker because
Right.
you're always hiking on like flat land
Right.
and you couldn't really go to the beach. I mean, there's a lake, but yeah, so I have to admit I'm a little envious of people who've grown up in Oregon and had
Yeah.
that their whole lives, had access to that. And there's amazing teen leadership in Oregon. Like we had an outdoor program and there were teenagers that were hired to lead groups of kids on like kayaking trips and rock climbing trips and things because they just grew up with it. You know, they grew up
Yeah,
with the leadership and they had the confidence and
yeah,
the skills. It was really cool to see.
yeah. That's true. Like that's something I started from 22 as well. Like having those hobbies as a, like, you just have to try things to discover probably, and then you figure out like what it's like. The more like stable it is, you're like, well, there's no need to try probably. So it just becomes very kind of like a saturated, I suppose.
Yeah, how do you feel like your interests were shaped by the place you grew up in?
Well, so this is something like I think about a lot. Like it's kind of like a so like especially like a city and like an area that I grew up around. It's like a tier two city back in India. Like so, not much happens there. Like in terms of there are a lot of people, but like not really things are being tried. It's very like traditional kind of ways of what you're supposed to like get a job and get a family, and so not a lot of experimental things going on. So i also
Right, right.
i also also didn't think of any of those things until I got out of house at 18 probably,
Uh-huh.
to study university. And then when really started living on my own, then I basically started figuring out like, oh, then if I can move from one city to other, maybe there are other things I can do that I was not supposed. So it just like it's like layers of onion start peeling out. Like oh,
Yeah.
it's like when you move to new city or new state or the next country, you're like, oh, I can go to any country. That I never had thought of that. So
Yeah.
so so it's like that. Like it has been evolution since then. Like but until that point was like very tracked. Like didn't know I should even be thinking about any of those things. That was not in vocabulary. So 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 like until I start university, I like, well, I'm not even know I'm supposed to think of those things. It's not in the universe. So so yeah, that
And
has been like a major change.
do you think that your parents, are they more proud of you or did they more wish that you had stayed close to home?
Well, it escalates. I think for some things they were like super happy. Like one thing my dad will often say like, well, I'll be happy if you can get like good job in the government basically, as a clerk. Even that's a stable job. You get insurance and all the things. But that was his thing. But when I went and got a job which pays much better, which is like very much interesting to me also, and then people will. He didn't realize how good it was, or like even when like when you get top of your class. So that was not like a very academic kind of history. So when other people will say he will come to school and people say like, oh, you're the father of Site, he will like, oh, that's interesting. I always thought it will be introduced the son of a father. So this is the first time. So those kind of things makes them kind of like realize like, oh, there's something interesting happening, because other people kind of like acknowledge as that as well. So
Yeah.
those are things, but over the time, it also has been like the case. Like, it would be nice if you like, you can't get anything in the town, but at least it would be nice to be in India. So we can take a flight or something like that. So they would like me to be closer, I think. So that's an ongoing discussion always.
Sure, sure, sure. When was the last time you were home?
More than 1 year back, 2020 December, I think that was my sister's
Uh-huh.
wedding. So that was the
After
last
you
time.
moved into your place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, 2019 December. Yeah, that's when. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And what's the future of travel for you when the pandemic's over? Do you have places you want to that you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, so last year was supposed to be for me to try a new continent called South America. Basically, really wanted to get to that point, but it totally got
Mm-hmm.
crushed. But like this is kind of like making me think also if it's like easy to go somewhere. Maybe it's best time because everyone's working remote. Maybe you can just go to some other place, live there for a month or so, and yeah, so that would be nice to do. But I had some obligations till this month, and afterwards basically I think it should be possible to move. So thinking actively about it. If you have some cool ideas from let me know, I'll try them out.
And what other languages do you speak? Do you speak Spanish?
I can dance on Spanish music but don't really speak. So but I mostly speak Hindi. That's my mother language. But yeah, I can pick up some words of Dutch, I suppose, but can't really make sentences. So uh, yeah, it's hard. Like it's it feels like there hasn't been necessity to pick up a language, so I haven't put enough energy also. So yeah, we'll see.
Right, right. Well, yeah, it's definitely not necessary in Amsterdam since it seems like everyone speaks English.
Yeah, that's kind of like
I
makes
mean,
you lazy a little bit. That at work is international. If you go to like a place, people will start switching to English. So it's kind of like a nice, but kind of like it makes you lazy also.
yeah, and if you're doing international, then like French or German or Spanish maybe would be even more useful.
Yeah, that was the thing. Initially, I was thinking like, well, it'd be nice to learn French, not for any reason, just because it sounded great to me. So I'm like, anyway, you can swear at me at French, that would be great. Like, I don't mind. It doesn't hurt. So, uh,
The blows fall softly.
right. So we'll see. What's next for you then? What's 2021
I
looking
really
like?
have no idea. I would really like to see Mexico City work out a little longer term,
Yeah,
and I just don't have even a backup plan because like I said, I really don't have anywhere in the States that I want to live.
yeah.
And I really don't have any countries that are burning on my list anymore. I mean, really liked Japan and Singapore. I'm not dying to get back to them. So I really think it's a good opportunity for me to work on learning Spanish and just trying to like be in one place and figure out what my place is in the world.
Fair
Like, what
enough.
am I meant to be doing?
Are you trying some new kind of hobbies or something at this point? You said languages you were learning, I think.
Yeah, only the language. I've really just kind of dialed it all back and
Yeah.
maybe lowered my expectations a bit because it's so stressful to be trying to force yourself to figure something out during a pandemic when so many things are not possible or just everything's more difficult.
Yeah.
So I'm just focusing on kind of like getting settled into another culture and learning the language and yeah.
Fair enough. Are you able to meet at least some people right now in your local hood or something?
I've only really met foreigners and it's been through walking the dogs.
Um,
I mean, I know a few of the dog walkers at the dog park that speak English, but it's really hard to communicate when you don't have a common language,
sure.
which is
Probably
why I
true.
need to up my game with the Spanish.
I'm
There's
saying it's
there's actually a university class that's pretty well respected, and I think registration starts in a week or so for starting in March. So
okay.
if I took that, that would be kind of a commitment to staying here for a while because
True.
it's not cheap, but it's all like and it's also an intensive course. So I would really have to be like, if I do that, I'm staying for a while.
True. But take my suggestion as well. I think dancing pickup is a great idea. You'll definitely pick up some Spanish
Okay.
dance. You'll pick up some La Cuenta por
Yeah.
favor, or all kind of words. Just comes around in the songs, and then you'll get into the zone.
So have you been studying it on YouTube or like just online somewhere?
No, I was doing classes in Amsterdam. Well,
Oh, okay.
back in the time, so it was like they have these social kind of like dancing things. So
Hmm.
that was like a I think it's a really big in a whole Latino culture kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So like that was a Friday evening thing to just go and take a class, and then afterwards you just you want to socialize but not really want to talk anymore. So it's kind of like a nice setup.
Right.
You dance one song with a person, then you switch to next person. You just like have a chit chat between, so it's kind of like a nice setup for that.
Yeah. There are dancing classes at the park next to my house, but they're really like they're dancing like they're getting close, and I'm just not
Right.
comfortable doing that during the pandemic. But yeah, afterwards, I mean, I can watch it from afar for sure.
Take it for a spin, maybe. Fair enough. All right. What else do you think should be considerate about? What else will be your message?
Oh, I don't know if I have a message. I was looking forward to hearing kind of how the Netherlands has been doing and how you've been doing with the pandemic and kind of what you think is coming up for you and for the world.
Yeah, a lot of up for grabs. It seems like we're in a blur, I guess. For I think next 6 months is still, so can't really plan for that. I guess. Just
Just trying to hold steady.
Yeah, just keep steady. Try to do virtually things as you can. Talk to people maybe a little bit more. Um,
Yeah, that's great you're doing that. That's so cool.
yeah. So and go from there.
Yeah, nice. Well, it was great seeing you again.
Same here. Super nice to see you.
I still think so often about our conversations. Like
Yeah.
really often I'll be like, oh yeah, and remember when Sitesh said
Wisdom of Sitesh.
still pondering those.
What do you think? Um, well, what's the new thing that you have picked up since our meetings in Amsterdam? Did you figure out something new that I should understand as well?
Oh, I'd have to put some thought into that.
Fair enough. All right, I'll let you go for now, but let's keep in touch and yeah, let's see how it goes forward.
Yeah, sounds good. Nice to see you, Sitesh.
Nice to see you too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.